Hi everyone, Mega Shorts here, bringing you another Doctor Who 5-inch scale action figure review, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of the brand new B&M exclusive sets from this year, and this is the 4th Doctor Collector's set, which includes the 4th Doctor as we saw him in the Pyramids of Mars, Leela, and a K9 Mk.1 figure. Now, I got this set recently from one of my local B&M stores for $14.99. I also managed to get the monster set, which includes a Cyber Controller figure from Tomb of the Cybermen, a Cyberman from Attack of the Cybermen, and a new series Sontaran figure. Now, the packaging for this set is pretty similar to the other sets in this series from this year. So on the front we've got a classic Doctor Who logo, the name of the set, the name of the figures, and a nice clear plastic bubble showing off the figures and the accessories, and also in the top left corner it does say that this is part of the collector series as well. Then on one of the sides we have a picture of the 4th Doctor with Leela, on the other there's a picture of the 4th Doctor with K9. Then on the back we have some pictures of the figures once again, along with the classic Doctor Who logo, and then at the bottom we just have the same usual product and company information. And that's pretty much it for the packaging, and now we're going to start taking a closer look at the figures from this set, starting with the 4th Doctor. Now, this particular variant of the 4th Doctor was originally released back in late 2009 as a Forbidden Planet exclusive. It was quite an easy figure to get back in the day, much easier to get than some of the other Forbidden Planet exclusives that were around at the time. However, I never actually got around to getting the original version of this figure, so unfortunately I cannot compare the original to this version in this review. However, I think it is safe to say that any differences between this particular version and the original are very, very small. No changes have been made to the sculpt whatsoever. However, I think there may be some little paint differences, like the eyes, which I think are a little bit brighter with their blue paint this time, and I think the skin tone may be just a tiny bit darker on this one as well, but other than that this figure is more or less the same as the original. However, it only comes with the sonic screwdriver this time, and not the sonic screwdriver and the time control panel, which the original single carded release did. Now, being relatively unfamiliar with this figure until recently, at first I thought the head sculpt that came with this figure was exactly the same as the one we got on the original 4th Doctor figure, which was based on his appearance in Robot. However, it turns out this is a completely different head sculpt. Again, exactly the same as the one we got on the original release of this particular variant, however, possibly with some small paint differences. I really like the facial expression they've given this figure. It's got Tom Baker's nice big grin, which is a sort of facial expression we very rarely get on Doctor Who action figures, and it's not often you see other action figures from other things these days that have these very different facial expressions, because normally action figures these days have these very solemn or straight faces which don't necessarily always capture the personality or the emotions of the character they're based on. But with 4th Doctor figures like this, I think it is really nice when they do figures of him with his grin like this, because he doesn't walk around smiling all the time in the show, but he has got this smile which he's always famous for, and a lot of the promotional images from the show back in the day when he was the Doctor did have him sort of doing a nice big smile like this. Would have been nice if it came with one of the alternative heads that we've had in the past with the 4th Doctor figures with a more solemn or serious look, but if you have some of the original 4th Doctor figures you may be able to do that already. The hat on this head sculpt is pretty nice, not really all that much to say about it to be honest. It looks pretty accurate to the one he wore in the episode. It's mostly quite dark grey with a slightly darker grey at the top here where the strap is, and underneath it isn't hollow, it is one great big solid bit of plastic that keeps the hat on top of the head, so it is not removable and there isn't any more hair underneath the head sculpt. It's just a great big lump of plastic that keeps the hat onto the figure. The face I think is done really, really well. Got a really, really good likeness to Tom Baker, and I think the hair has been sculpted really nicely as well. I think the hair underneath the hat, the parts that come out to the sides I mean, is actually a separate piece to the rest of the head. I think it's not actually attached to the face. Well, I think it is attached to the face, but what I'm saying is I think it's actually a separate piece altogether. I don't think it's actually done as part of this part of the head sculpt. I think it's done like the hat where it's another piece just glued on. At least that's what it seems like anyway, because if you look underneath you can actually see that there are some sculpted ears there which are a nice touch, and you've got his sideburns underneath as well. The scarf is pretty much the same as it was on the original, very nice and colourful from top to bottom, and it's also got the sculpted detail of the texturing which I really like. However, also like the original, it has just been painted on one side. It's been painted on the front, but not on the back. Not at all. There's no colour there. And to be honest, I'm quite surprised about this. I was hoping that for this particular release of this figure, they will have added the colour to the back of it, because I know when the original version of this figure came out, a lot of people were quite upset that it only had the colour on the front and not on the back. And it would have given the figure a little bit more detail, and it would have made it look a little bit more accurate. But I guess for some people this may not be much of a problem, because if you have the figure in a fairly normal pose on display or wherever, you probably won't see the back of the scarf at all, so you wouldn't really know that problem is actually there, or you wouldn't remember it. But to be honest, I really would have liked this figure just a little bit more if it did have the colour on the back as well. But aside from that, I haven't really got any issues with the scarf. It looks really nice. I love all the colours on it. There does seem to be a little bit of a paint problem at the top here though, where there should be red, but there's just this bit of cream, and I'm not really sure if that's meant to be there or not. So that might not be something that has happened with all the 4th Doctor figures from these sets. So if you are buying this set, or you are thinking of buying this set, and you get the chance to see multiple versions of this set, just make sure you have a good look through them to make sure they haven't got a similar problem like that. His coat has been painted with a fairly dark purpley brown, like it was in the show. It has got some quite nice sculpted detail to it. If you lift up the scarf, you can see it's got a few buttons with some holes next to them. There's quite a few lines in the stitching, especially on the back, where there's also a couple of pockets and a couple of bigger buttons here. Plenty of creases, especially around the elbows, and there's some buttons at the ends of the sleeves as well. His cravat has been done quite nicely. It's been done with sort of a very lightish red or orange, and then the shirt has also got some really tiny painted lines on it, which have been done with red, blue, grey, and there's also quite a bit of yellow as well. If you take a close look at my one, you can see that it does look like the paint for the buttons has slipped a little bit under where it should be. You've got the sculpt of the buttons, but then underneath you've got the little grey patches, which really should be actually on the buttons themselves, I think. Again, I'm not sure if this is a problem that's present with all the 4th Doctor figures from this set, so that is a tiny little issue you may wish to look out for. But still, I think this came out really well. I think it's really nice, all the paint detail they've added to this. And a nice little feature about it that I've just noticed is that if you lift up the jacket, you can see that they have actually continued the stripes underneath it as well. And I easily think they could have just left this blank, because the jacket is meant to just sit over it really. So that's really nice. Not really much to say about the trousers, to be honest. They've just been painted with a fairly light grey, fairly similar to the ones we got on the original 4th Doctor figure from Robot. Quite a few creases on them though, and the shoes at the bottom have been done quite nicely. They've been painted with a sort of very light grey brown, but I think they have got a little bit of a silver wash to them, which makes them look a little bit dirty and dusty, and they have got some quite nice sculpted detail to them as well. You can see the laces and the little patterns on the front. Not really all that much on the bottom really, just the usual copyright BBC and character stuff. No holes in the bottom of the feet like some of the new series figures, so you can't really put this figure on a display stand unless you actually make a hole in the feet. Moving on to his articulation now. The head can move a little bit from side to side, although the scarf does restrict the movement a little bit. The arms can go all the way around from the shoulders. Sadly, they don't have ball jointed shoulders like some of the more recent Doctor Who 5-inch scale figures, but you can still get quite a bit of movement out of them. The arms also have a swivel joint just above the biceps where they can turn all the way around. There's a joint at the elbows where they can go up and down as usual, and he also has wrist joints so the hands can turn all the way around. He does have a waist joint as well, although the jacket is a little bit restrictive, but it is made from quite a soft material, so you can get him to go to the side quite a bit. The legs can also move outwards very slightly, but the jacket does restrict them a bit. They can also move backwards and forwards on the top. They can also swivel just above the thighs all the way around, and he has joints at the knees where the legs can move backwards and forwards. So the articulation for this figure is pretty much standard for a classic series 4th Doctor figure. The scarf may limit the head movement a little bit, but that can't really be helped, so to be honest I haven't really got a problem with that. And quite frankly, I think the articulation on this figure is just fine the way it is. Even though he may not have some of the joints of some of the more recent Doctor Who action figures we've seen, you can still get quite a few poses out of him with or without his accessories. So when it comes to the posability on this figure, I think it's just fine the way it is. Okay, so overall, I think the Fourth Doctor from the Pyramids of Mars is a really nice addition to my Classic Series figure collection. I'm really happy Character decided to re-release this particular variant for this set rather than one of the other Fourth Doctor figures. I don't actually have all the Fourth Doctor variants out there, but this was a variant I didn't have until now, so I'm glad they decided to give us this one with this particular set. To be honest, I don't really have many problems with this figure. I think the sculpt of this figure came out really well, especially with the head sculpt and the facial expression. I really like the way they've done the costume, especially the cravat and the shirt. Again, I would have liked this figure a bit more if the scarf was painted on both sides so that we had a little bit more painted detail to it. But to be honest, other than that, I'm really happy with this figure. The articulation is pretty good. Again, really good sculpt and really good paintwork for the most part. So out of 10, I'll give this figure a very well earned 8 out of 10. Really nice figure. Again, I think the scarf painted on both sides would have made it definitely a lot better, but still it is a pretty good figure, and if you've not already got it, then I'd definitely recommend it to you. And that's pretty much it for the Fourth Doctor figure, and now we're just going to take a quick look at the sonic screwdriver. Okay, so here we have the Fourth Doctor sonic screwdriver. Pretty much the same as it has been with all the other Fourth Doctor figures we've seen so far. Most of it is silver, but towards the top you've got a little black bit and a little red bit at the top, and it does fit quite nicely into his right hand, but not his left hand, which isn't exactly sculpted to hold a sonic screwdriver. I've always thought the left hand on these Fourth Doctor figures was always made to have a jelly baby bag accessory, but sadly we've never actually got one with any of the Fourth Doctor figures, so I do wonder if they actually sculpted that in mind for one way back then when they were first making these figures. But anyway, no problems with the sonic screwdriver at all. It's a nice accessory to have, and I am happy they've included it with this set. You would think that with every Doctor or every figure set with a Doctor figure they would include a sonic screwdriver, but there have been some sets in the past where he hasn't come with one at all, so I am glad they've given us this particular accessory for this set, especially given it's been such a long time since we last saw a figure of the Fourth Doctor as well. So for the sonic screwdriver, got no problems with it at all. From me it gets very well earned 5 out of 5. Okay, so here we have the Leela figure. Now, like the Fourth Doctor figure from this set, this figure is pretty much just a slightly repainted re-release, this one being a re-release of the Invasion of Time Leela figure, which came out about 5 or 6 years ago. The only differences between this figure are some very, very small ones in the paintwork. The hair on this particular version is a little bit darker, with not so much light brown shading over the top. Her eyes are a little bit brighter, with a bit more blue this time, and I think the lips may have been painted a little bit differently this time as well. But other than that, this one is pretty much the same as the original, and also quite similar to the image of the Fendal Leela figure, which is the only other Leela figure I have at the moment. I think the head sculpt for this figure turned out really well. I think this is definitely the best out of the Leela head sculpts we've had so far. It's definitely got a really good likeness to Louise Jameson. The hair, even though it is a bit darker than it was on the original release, it has still got some of that light brown shading over the top, which I really like, and I think the sculpted detail on this turned out really well. No problems with the facial features as well, they've came out really well, and the lighter blue paint in the eyes is a nice touch as well. Wouldn't say it's a necessary change, but it is a nice little difference. The costume is pretty much the same as it was on the original, and pretty much the same as it is on the image of the Fendal figure. You've got her dress, and then you've got her boots down here as well. The dress is a fairly light creamy green, or brown I'd say. I'm not really sure what to make of this colour. I don't know what you guys think of it, but I sort of see it as quite a lightish browny green. And it has got a little bit of more paint to it. It's not just the same colour all the way around. You've got some little brown lines in it where there's some creases, and then the detail of the stitching, and there's also some bits where it's been sewn together at the sides as well, and there's also some more lines in it around the back as well, and a little pocket as well. And then on her arms she's also got these little sort of bracelet things as well, and then down here she's also got the holster which you can put the knife accessory in quite nicely. Her boots have been quite nicely done as well, mostly dark brown, but they have got this really nice light brown wash going over the top of them, which makes them look quite muddy and dirty, and also does help to bring out some of the sculpted detail in them as well. And if you look at the top of the back of them, you can see they've got these red little strings on them as well. Not really much on the bottom of them, just the usual BBC and copyright info really. Now, my one big problem with the sculpt of this figure lies within the left hand, and this is because this uses the sculpt of another Leela figure, the very original Leela figure, which had a black bracelet on the wrist, and The bracelet is still present on this figure. However, in order to make the figure a little bit more accurate, it has just been painted over with the skin tone from the hand. And from certain angles, it does look fairly normal. It just looks like a normal arm with a normal wrist and a normal hand. But then if you look at it from certain positions, you can see that it's still got the sculpted detail of the bracelet. You can actually see there, if you look closely, there's some sculpted detail of creases within the bracelet. So it looks really, really odd. And I wish that for this figure they gave her a new hand without the bracelet as part of the sculpt. I guess from a certain distance, or if you got the figure in certain poses, it probably just looks quite normal, but to me that just looks really, really odd, and I'm surprised that they didn't change it for this particular figure, really. Moving on to the articulation now. Her head can go from side to side, although the long hair does restrict the movement quite a bit. The arms have ball jointed shoulders, so they can move outwards and inwards quite nicely. They can also go all the way around from the shoulders as well, however it is quite difficult to do on her left side. The arms also have the usual bicep swivel joints where they can turn all the way around. They can also go up and down at the elbows, and there are also wrist swivel joints where they can go all the way around. There's also a waist swivel joint where it can go from side to side and possibly all the way around as well. The legs can also go a little bit outwards from the top. It can go backwards and forwards slightly, bend at the knees, and the boots also have swivel joints where they can turn all the way around. So like the original version of this figure, this Leela figure has got loads of articulation, making it actually a little bit more poseable than the 4th Doctor figure in this set. And to be honest, I've not got any problems with the articulation on this figure whatsoever. The hair may restrict the movement a bit, but that can't really be helped. I guess if it was made with a slightly softer material, you'd be able to get it to move from side to side a bit more. But even then, with the way the neck is in the joint, it would still be a bit difficult, I think. And not really got any problems with the joints on this figure. But if you are going to get this set, definitely be careful if you are trying to turn the arm all the way around on this side, because her hair does get in the way a bit, and it may also chip some of the paint off, because as you can see the paint does chip off the shoulders a little bit on this figure as well, because it does seem to be a little bit flaky on this figure as well. But other than that, I haven't really got many problems with this figure, to be honest. Again, I really like the head sculpt on this figure. I think it's easily the best out of the Leela figure head sculpts we've had so far. The paintwork for the most part has turned out quite nicely. I really like the way the hair's been done and the way the boots have been painted as well, with that light brown wash over the dark brown paint. And I think the articulation is just fine the way it is as well. So from me, this Leela figure gets a very well earned 8 out of 10. Really nice figure, but my only problem with it is the sculpted bracelet within the wrist there that's just been painted over with the skin tone. Other than that, this is a pretty nice figure. I guess if you have the original, the changes that have been made to it for this set may make this set a little bit more worth buying, but if you haven't already got a Leela figure, this will make a nice addition to your collection. So before we take a look at the K9 figure, we're just going to take a really quick look at her knife accessory. To be honest, I don't really have much to say about this really. It's just about as detailed as it can be for a 5-inch scale figure, with the brown bit at the bottom and the silver bit at the top. It fits into her right hand very nicely without any problems, and it does fit quite nicely and securely within the holster within her waist. So if you want to keep it somewhere where you probably won't lose it, or you don't want to risk having it fall out when you have it on display, you could easily just put it in a holster, and even if you tip the figure upside down, it doesn't really fall out. So if you're worried about the figure falling over and the knife falling out, that shouldn't be a problem either. And that's it for the knife accessory. 5 out of 5, no problems with it at all. Again, just about as detailed and as accurate as it can be for a figure of this scale. Okay, so here we have the new Classic Series K9 variant on the left, next to 2 of the previous K9 figures, including the K9 figure that came with the Season 18 4th Doctor figure back in 2010. Now this particular figure of K9 uses exactly the same sculpt as all the others we've seen as part of the 5-inch scale line so far. However, this one has been given a much darker repaint to make him look a lot more accurate to the Classic Series than any of the previous K9 figures, which have always been more like how we saw him in the new series. As you can see, this one is much darker than any of the previous K9 figures, with a much more dull dark grey instead of the light bluey silver that's present on the others. The control panel at the top is also painted black with the same coloured buttons rather than silver at the bottom. The tail is also now completely black as well, rather than black and silver. The viewing panel on the side is also light blue this time, rather than silver like the rest of the figure. And the bands at the bottom have also been painted with a darker shade of grey this time. Aside from that, the two figures are more or less the same. He still has the pull and go wheels at the bottom, so if you have him on a smooth surface, he can go forward quite nicely by himself as well. And you can hear the wheels going there. Also, unlike the previous K9 figures we've seen in the 5-inch scale line so far, this one doesn't have the removable panel on the side. So on this one, when you press the button at the top, nothing happens. But on all the previous ones, if you press the panel on the top, the panel would come out and you would see some of the sculpted detail underneath. And to be honest, I am actually quite surprised this new K9 figure doesn't have that feature, seeing as it does use exactly the same sculpt. I knew there were some paint differences on this one compared to the previous ones, but I was always thinking that that panel would still be removable. But to be honest, I don't think that's really much of a problem. I still really like this figure the way it is, and I have to say I think this is definitely my favourite K9 variant now. It's far more accurate to how we saw him in the classic series, rather than the others, which have always been much closer to how we've seen him in the new series, even the season 18 4th Doctor K9 figure, which was pretty much just the new series K9 figure re-released. So I think it's really nice we've got a much more screen accurate classic K9 figure for this set, and I think this is pretty much the main attraction of the set. So if you are after a K9 figure and you want one that is specifically from the classic series, I'd say definitely get this set while you can from the shops, because I think it would definitely go up in price quite a bit over the coming months or next few years when the set becomes a bit more harder to find in retail. So overall, I think the K9 figure is really good. I love the fact it's been given a more accurate repaint. All the detail on it has turned out really well. Looks very accurate to how he did in the classic series, and I really like the pull and go wheels at the bottom. They're a really nice feature, seeing as you can't really give K9 any articulation either. So from me, this classic series K9 figure gets a very well earned 10 out of 10. Easily my favourite figure of the set, and I definitely highly recommend it, especially if you haven't got a K9 figure already in your classic collection. Okay, so now the time has come for me to give a summary of my thoughts on this set. Overall, I think the 2017 B&M exclusive 4th Doctor Collector set is a great addition to my Doctor Who figure collection. I'm really happy with the figures in this set, especially the classic K9 figure, which I think is a massive improvement over the one we got with the season 18 4th Doctor figure back in 2010. I really like the Pyramids of Mars 4th Doctor figure. Even though the scarf isn't painted on both sides, it has got some really good sculpted detail and a really good head sculpt. I think the Leela figure is pretty good as well. Again, I don't really have many problems with the figure, but I just really don't like the way that left wrist has been done, with the bracelet still as part of the sculpt but painted over with the regular skin tone. And from me, this set gets a very well earned 8 out of 10. This is a really good figure set, especially if you missed out on the original versions of the 4th Doctor and the Leela figure, which I did. But even if you have the original versions, there are some differences between them, which may make this set a little bit more worth picking up for you. My only problems with this set are with the 4th Doctor scarf not being painted on both sides and the wrist on the Leela figure. But still, those are only minor complaints in a set which I definitely recommend to any classic series Doctor Who fan out there, especially if you haven't got the original versions of the figures already. And like I said, the K9 is a massive improvement over the season 18 K9 figure we've got. So if you want a more accurate classic series K9 figure, look no further than this set. And that is pretty much it for my review of the B&M exclusive 4th Doctor Collector set. Hope you've all enjoyed watching this review. If you want to share your thoughts on these figures, you can do so in the comment section below. And my next Doctor Who action figure review will probably be of the Monster set, which is another B&M exclusive set from this year. And yeah, thanks for watching this review, guys, and I will see you again soon.